All right, let's dive right into this explainer and untangle the massive 2,400-year-old web that is the lost city of Atlantis. We've all heard the legend, right? A brilliantly advanced empire that just suddenly vanished beneath the crashing waves of the ocean. It's a story that's completely captivated explorers, philosophers, and mystics for literally centuries. But how did a simple story from ancient Greece evolve into maps detailing psychic energy and then eventually into a massive geographical thought experiment? Well, today we're going to unpack exactly what Atlantis is, what it isn't, and what it actually could have been.
Because this topic covers such a massive spectrum, here is our roadmap for today. 1. Plato and the original myth. 2. Pseudoscience, spirits, and crystals. 3. The dark Atlantean legacy. 4. What if it were real? 5. An alternate history timeline. And 6. The power of a myth. Let's get started.
Section 1. Plato and the original myth. The origins of Atlantis. We begin in Athens around 360 BC, where the philosopher Plato first described an incredibly wealthy, utopian island located just past the Pillars of Hercules, basically what we know today as the Strait of Gibraltar. According to Plato's dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, this was a civilization that existed 11,000 years ago. He described this massive island featuring a city built in concentric rings of water and land, connected by highly advanced canals. It supposedly had walls made of exotic, precious metals, like the mysterious orichalcum, a massive navy, and just untold wealth.
So with all those hyper-specific descriptions of concentric rings and advanced canals, you might be wondering, did Atlantis actually exist? Well, despite the vivid details, most historians agree on the answer to this massive question, and that answer is a solid no. Modern science has extensively mapped the ocean floor using advanced sonar, and despite all our technological progress, absolutely no trace of a sunken continent has ever been found exactly where Plato described. Plus, no other ancient Greek writers from that era even mention Atlantis outside of Plato's teachings.
So the crucial point to take away here is that Plato was not describing a literal place. He was creating a philosophical parable. It was a warning about the hubris and greed of mankind. As the story goes, the Atlanteans became way too greedy, attempted to conquer Athens, and were struck down by the gods in a single day and night of violent earthquakes and floods. It was a fictional scenario, deliberately designed to teach his students about justice, government, and the inevitable downfall of corrupt societies.
Moving on to Section 2, Pseudoscience, Spirits, and Crystals. Pseudoscience meets myth. Now, jumping ahead to the 19th century, we see this scientific revolution awkwardly colliding with the spiritualist movement. During this time, empirical science was rapidly displacing old explanations of the world. But while people were embracing that new empirical evidence, a lot of folks still clung tightly to mysticism. They tried to fill in the gaps of human history, like, say, how the Egyptians and Mayans both built pyramids without ever talking to each other, using this really bizarre blend of actual science and pure spiritualism. It's fascinating to contrast Plato's original intention with the wild claims of figures like William Scott Elliot. He literally mapped Atlantis using psychic powers alongside really superficial empirical evidence. At the end of the 1800s, Scott Elliot produced these painstakingly detailed maps that looked totally legitimate on the surface. But he claimed Atlantis reached its prime 1,000,000 years ago, which, mind you, is long before humans even figured out how to farm. And he asserted these details were revealed to him not through archaeology but through spiritual clairvoyance.
This perfectly illustrates how a simple parable got completely hijacked by various mystics and con artists who added bizarre layers to the story. I mean, we're talking alien DNA, giant crystals, and extraterrestrial intervention. You've got Helena Blavatsky claiming Atlanteans were a race of giants. Then you have the famous psychic Edgar Cayce claiming they possessed lasers and powered flying machines using a massive quartz crystal called the Tuwawi Stone, drawing energy from the sun. These were essentially science fiction stories, just clothed in the aesthetic of actual science.
Section 3. The Dark Atlantean Legacy. Myth Weaponized. Unfortunately, we do have to examine how this specific brand of pseudoscience took a very dark turn in the 1930s. As the myth of Atlantis grew in the esoteric community, it started getting attached to racial theories. Mystics began claiming that survivors of the sunken Atlantis fled across the globe, bringing culture to what they viewed as primitive peoples, ultimately framing these Atlanteans as a superior, advanced root race.
Looking at the historical record, Heinrich Himmler and the Nazis weaponized these exact pseudoscientific myths about an advanced Aryan root race to justify the atrocities of the Holocaust. In the years leading up to World War II, Himmler actually funded real archaeological expeditions searching for evidence of Atlantis.
The goal was to prove that a superior ancient civilization existed and that their ancestors were its direct descendants, using this completely fabricated lore as a foundational tool for their horrific agenda.
This starkly reminds us why properly debunking fake science matters so much. Clothing a myth in scientific-sounding language can have devastating, real-world consequences. It might seem like harmless fun when someone is talking about magic crystals and flying ships, but when a bogus story co-opts the language of science to rewrite human origins, it can be utilized by dangerous individuals to justify heinous acts of violence. The facts matter, and the actual history of evidence matters immensely.
Section 4. What if it were real? A geographical experiment. Okay, let's shift to a completely different lens and indulge in a really grounded geographical thought experiment. What if the continent actually existed exactly where Plato claimed? For this exercise, we're tossing out the magic crystals and space aliens. We're going to place a massive landmass in the Atlantic Ocean, right on the volatile mid-Atlantic ridge, directly between North America and Europe, and just see how the actual physics and history of our world would react.
If a massive landmass sat right there between North America and Africa, the physical and geological impacts would fundamentally rewrite the environmental history of Earth. Placing a continent there would act like a massive ocean wall, entirely disrupting the Gulf Stream, that current of warm water that keeps Western Europe temperate. Without it, Europe would become significantly colder, completely changing its biomes. Furthermore, a continent isolated in the ocean for millions of years would develop entirely unique plants and animals. And tragically, most of those would face mass extinction the very moment early humans finally set foot on the island.
Section 5. An alternate history timeline. A hypothetical timeline. Building on those geological facts, let's map out exactly how human empires would have interacted with this fictional continent over time. Because of its location, it absolutely wouldn't be a secret forever. Eventually, seafaring nations would bump into it, transforming Atlantis from an isolated landmass into the ultimate historical battleground.
This timeline really grounds the speculation, showing how real-world historical expansion would turn Atlantis into a heavily contested global crossroads. Based on natural trade winds and currents, Celtic tribes would likely arrive first, around the 300s BC, establishing a foundational culture. But soon after, the ever-expanding Roman Empire would cross the sea in the 1st century CE to establish colonies for resources and prestige. Fast forward to the 700s, the Umayyad Caliphate from Morocco would push into the southern warmer regions. And finally, in the 900s, Viking raiders would swoop in from the north to establish trading posts and Nordic kingdoms.
Because of those successive invasions, the society that would emerge would be this absolutely fascinating, totally unique melting pot. We're talking 40% Celtic roots, 25% Latin and Roman influence, 20% Arab and Islamic heritage, and 15% Nordic. You'd have feudal kingdoms practicing Islam in the south with heavy Arab architectural influences, while the north would feature Norse-influenced Celtic kingdoms. The language would be a wild mix of Latin, Arabic, and Celtic roots. It would be a culture unlike anything else on Earth, serving as a stepping stone that would probably lead to the discovery of the Americas centuries earlier than in our own timeline.
Section 6. The Power of a Myth. Why we still believe. To bring our explainer to a close today, let's step out of the alternate reality and back into the present day to reflect on this whole journey. We've seen how Plato's simple philosophical warning mutated into a spiritualist fantasy, got twisted into a dangerous weapon of war, and ultimately serves as an incredible canvas for geographical what-ifs.
As archaeologists love to point out, the actual empirical evidence of human history provides way more than enough wonder, tragedy, and triumph to satisfy our curiosity. We really don't need etheric energy planes or flying ships powered by crystals to find history fascinating. The actual story of how ancient humans navigated the globe, built massive structures, and developed highly complex societies is already a breathtaking narrative all on its own.
So I want to leave you with this thought to ponder. Why are we still so intoxicated by a 2,400-year-old fictional parable? What is our endless desperation to find this lost city say about our own modern anxieties and our need to believe in magic? Perhaps we cling to Atlantis because we just want to believe that there is still something wonderful, lost, and undiscovered out there in the world. It's a comforting idea that somewhere in the deep past, we had it all figured out. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the history of how we know what we know.